And the very last rule that we have is anytime whatsoever we have a different fraction rather than 1/2. So anytime we have a fraction exponent, this is kind of how the breakdown is. The number on top is the exponent that it is raised to. And the number on bottom is that radical piece. So that basically that radical piece is telling you how many need to be in a group. So for instance, right here, if I have a to the m divided by n, the n is a part of the radical, and the m is just telling you what it's all raised to. So if I take a look at number 59, I have x raised to the 2/3. So x raised to that 2/3, the top one is your exponent, the bottom one is your radical. So we would rewrite this as the third root of x and then squared. Because that 3 goes with that bottom number, it goes with the radical. That 2 goes with that x as that exponent. Now, I cannot do anything else here because since my radical is saying groups of 3 and x squared is only 2x's, I actually cannot reduce, I cannot pull anything out, I can't do anything. So this right here is as far as I can go. So if I take a look at number 60, I have 5 raised to the 2/5. Well, that 5 on the bottom is part of your radical, and that 2 is that exponent. Now, I can actually simplify this down just a little bit. And I can simplify this down just a little bit because 5 squared is saying 5 times 5. And I know 5 times 5 is 25. There is no fifth root to 25 because that's saying I need groups of 5. Well, right here, I can just rewrite it by multiplying out the 5 times 5. So on number 60, my answer would be 5 square, or the fifth root of 25. If I take a look at number 61, this is saying xy all raised to the 1/4. Well, if I rewrite this again, the bottom goes with the radical. So this is saying the fourth root of xy raised to that first power. Well, anytime I'm raising anything to the first power, I don't actually have to rewrite it. So I can just write this as the fourth root of xy. And I cannot simplify this down anymore because that 4 is saying they need groups of 4. And since x is just x and y is just y, we can't pull anything out. So let's take a look at number 62. We are taking 2x squared and raising it to the 3/5. So what we're going to go ahead and do is that 5 goes with the radical, and then I have 2x squared, and that is all raised to that third power. Now we are going to have to distribute this 3 to both of these guys inside that parentheses. So you are going to distribute that 3 to the 2 and that 3 to that x squared. So this will end up giving you the fifth root of, and then 2 to the third, and then x to the, if I do 2 times 3, that gives me 6. Now I can simplify this down a little bit more because we know 2 to the third is saying 2 times 2 times 2. Well, that's not a group of 5, so it doesn't come out of that radical, but it does become an 8. But if we look at the x's, x to the 6 is saying x times x times x 6 times. And I am trying to find groups of 5. Well, if I look here, I have one group of 5 right here. So that means that on the outside of the radical, I am going to have an x. But then inside the radical, I still am going to have an x. Because one group comes out, but one x is still left over. And it's still the fifth root. So my answer here would be x, fifth root of 8x. Because I can pull one group out right here because it's a group of 5, but then that x has to stay put underneath because that one is not a group of 5 right here. That 8 became an 8 because 2 to the third is 2 times 2 times 2. Take a look at number 63. So if I look at this one, I want to break it down again. That 2 on the bottom of that fraction exponent is telling you that it is how many are in a group, or what is in that radical. So you're saying 2 radical of 25 to the third. Now there's a couple of different ways in which you can do this. Personally, for this one, I would go ahead and take the square root of 25 first, then apply that exponent of 3. And the main reason for that is because it'll make it a smaller number. If you do 25 to the third power, it's going to give you a very, very large number. But if we do the square root of 25 first, it'll give you a smaller number to begin with. And smaller numbers tend to be easier for us to deal with. The square root of 25 is 5, because 5 times 5 is 25. Then I would do 5 to the third power. Well, 5 to the third power would be 5 times 5 times 5, which is 125. Sometimes it is easier to take the square root. Sometimes it is easier to distribute. It just depends upon the problem. So number 64. Number 64 is, again, a problem that is easier to actually deal with the radical first and then go from there. So if we were to rewrite our radical, that 3 is part of the radical, so we would say 3, 8 squared. Now the reason why 3, 8, the cube root of 8 is easier is because you're trying to find out groups of 3 for 8. Well, 8 can be broken down into 2 times 2 times 2. That right there is a group of 3. So that means that the cube root of 8 is 2. So I can rewrite this as 2 squared. And 2 squared is 4. So again, sometimes it's easier to take that radical first. Sometimes it's easier to take that radical first. Let me go ahead and show you on the calculator how you can actually enter in this right here, so that way you can kind of take some of the guesswork out. So if you wanted to do the cube root of 8 in your calculator, you would enter in a 3 first, because that's what the group is. That's what the radical is. Then you would go to your math button, and see this number 5? See how it says x radical? You can go ahead and use that. If you wanted to, you could use number 4, because see how it already has 3 radical like that? I just recommend always doing the 5th one, just because that way you don't get confused whenever it's a 5th root or a 4th root or a 6th root or anything like that. So I'd use number 5. And the cool thing is that it automatically fixes that right here in that radical. So you actually see the cube root. Then you can enter in an 8. Hit enter, and it'll give you your answer of 2, which is what we just found. So if we take a look at number 65. So this one right here is 16 raised to the negative 3/4. Well, it's a negative, so automatically I want to make the reciprocal. But see how there's not a fraction already? You can actually turn 16 into a fraction by putting it over 1. So now I can flip-flop my fraction right away. So I end up having 1 over 16, and then that 16 is raised to that 3/4. Now we can break 16 into that radical. So this will give me 1 over, and then this right here is the 4th root of 16, and then raised to the 3rd power. Again, this is an instance where it's actually going to be easier to take that radical first, because it'll end up giving you a smaller number. It'll end up giving you a smaller number. So let's go ahead and let's practice in the calculator entering that in again. So if I go to my calculator and I want to enter in the 4th root of 16, remember, hit 4 first, because that right there is part of your radical. Hit the math button, and go to number 5. And again, it'll make it go up like this, which is pretty neat for it. And then enter in 16. Press enter. So the fourth root of 16 is 2. A little bit smaller number, a little bit easier to work with. So that means that I am going to have 1, change colors, 1 over 2, and then now that's to the third power. Well, 2 to the third power is saying 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. So your answer for this one is 1 over 8. And if we look at number 66, same idea. So I'm going to break it up into that radical. So since 3 is on bottom, it's going to be the cube root of 27 raised to the 5th power. Again, it is easier to do the radical first. So if I enter that into my calculator, just getting lots of practice doing this, I'd enter in 3, math, go to that number 5, and then enter in 27. So the cube root of 27 is 3. So I would end up having that 3, and then now it's raised to the 5th power. Well, that's saying 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, or in your calculator, you could just enter 3 to the 5th power. And then that'll end up giving your answer of that 243. So if we go back to that number 6 notes, we can actually now simplify down 16 to the 1/4. Because 16 to the 1/4 is saying that we need to turn that 4 as my radical, and then 16 raised to the 1st power. So we're basically taking the 4th root of 16. And if we look back at our calculator, we actually did that right here. So the 4th root of 16 is 2. So this reduced answer right here is the square roots of x divided by